South African farmers have started laying off labourers just 2 days after the government raised the minimum wage for the sector by 50% in response to a wave of violent farm strikes down in Cape Town. Joining us now to discuss the implications of the minimum wage is Katishi Masemola. He's the General Secretary of the Food and Allied Workers Union, as well as Hans van der Merwe. He's the Executive Director for Agri-SA. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on to Beyond Markets. Let me start with you, sir. Farmers have warned that the 105 rand that the minister has laid down as the basic minimum wage is going to lead to enormous job losses. We've seen farmers in the Limpopo region in South Africa already starting to issue notices. Are we likely to see other farmers doing exactly the same thing? We know that in the Western Cape there hasn't been any reports of this kind of backlash.
We try to manage the situation. I think what South Africa needs is jobs, not more jobless people. We have huge poverty problems already, and the situation may just become totally unsustainable. We try to tell farmers to, if they want to do it, to use the CCMA and the Department of Labour to interact to see if they can find solutions, to see whether they can work on an hour basis, lower wages, or see whatever is possible. In the meantime, we're still engaging with government whether it's really the final decision. Because it is not what we only said. The research, objective research indicated that at this level there will be major restructuring, not because farmers want to do so, because if they want to survive in a global market where they have to compete with very effective producers from Southern America, from Australia and New Zealand in marketplaces, then you have to look at the factor cost as such, and if it becomes a too high proportion, machine will replace man.
Okay,
that's unfortunately the case.
Let me bring Mr. Masemola in here. You've released a statement condemning what you call the kneejerk reaction by farmers. Surely you have to take into consideration some of the issues that Agri-SA is raising, in the same way as Agri-SA will have to take into consideration that your members also cannot survive on the 70 rand per day that they were being paid, considering the price of petrol, the price of electricity, etc., etc. How are you going to find each other?
Well, firstly, had we had genuine and sincere and meaningful negotiations prior to the sectoral determination, it's possible that we could have settled at less than 105 between ourselves and farm owners. But unfortunately, it went to an extent of the minister making a pronouncement. In any case, the clarion call by our members was 150 rand per day, and that also is considered to be far from sustaining any life meaningfully for a family. But in any case, we're still open to an idea of further talks for as long as they are genuine and they seek to find solution. And I'm happy to hear from Agri-SA that that kind of an attitude is what is being encouraged. On a farm by farm or on a sector basis, we have to have the sector talking, because ultimately any meaningful solution, long-lasting, is going to emerge out of sincere talks.
Now, the question of sincere talks leading up to the process where the minister makes a determination, we've seen that the strikes were often violent. We've seen that there were accusations from both sides that people were not sticking to the arrangements, that there was intimidation, that there was violence, both from the side of workers, but also groups linked to farmers, where workers allege that they've been intimidated. Now that the minister's come up with a figure, is it not perhaps important to reflect from both sides, and I'll start with Agri-SA, that the way in which you conduct yourself as a key player in determining what eventually is set for the sector, that you should have done things differently? I know that FAO, when I spoke with Mr. Masemola previously, they said that they can't push for 150 rand because they know that it's not possible in all cases. But I hear that TAO here, certainly in Gauteng, is saying they want to go only as high as 80 rand a day.
About the process, I think we need to reflect on it and assess how can we deal with it differently in future as well. fact of the matter is that the Basic Conditions of Employment Act is intended to serve the interests of sectors where you have vulnerable workers, and it is very difficult and in most cases unorganized from a labor side sector. Also on the employer side, with a very diverse group of participants where it is very difficult to standardize wage arrangements. So the intent of a Basic Conditions of Employment determination is to set a minimum entry-level wage. That isn't supposed to be the living wage and the real wage. It should be for mostly an unskilled worker and in many cases a part-time worker as well. And what was, I think, very misleading is the process indicates that the minister decides on advice of the employment's condition after the department has solicited input on the issue and therefore requested, and Labour agreed, that it doesn't help throwing around numbers. Do a proper academic analysis, independent analysis of what the effect of various wage scenarios will be on the sustainability of the sector and eventually on jobs as well. And we deemed that very important to provide that as an input for the Employment Conditions Commission to say this is the best information to balance the interest of workers to that of employees. And it is not a negotiating thing, as if you have a bargaining council in a well-structured industry. So I think people were misled all the time about our ability to do so. And even if Agri-SA agreed to a number at that stage, it could not be enforced. The only way that you can determine a minimum wage is by sectoral determination by the minister, and that process had been supportive all along the way by our
organisation. Let me bring you in here, Mr. Basimola. The process itself, you have acknowledged that you are open for negotiations. So, of course, you must be aware of the fact that some farmers are going to find this very difficult, and the consequence for your members might well be job losses. What are you prepared to go down to, and what are the kind of variables that you'll be taking into consideration? I've just seen reports today that the one option where if farmers, for example, feel that they can't afford this, that they can take it up, and there's been no uptake so far. So where exactly are you prepared to concede on this issue?
Well, I think the first step will be for farm owners that are not able to afford 105 rand to take the advantage as presented by the minister for an opportunity to present evidence that indeed they can't. And we're open to negotiations because, like Agri-SA say, you wouldn't want to have destruction of jobs. Where genuinely a farm owner can't afford, there has to be other mechanism in place to allow such a farm to succeed. So we kind of alive to the need of having to save jobs. But look, with the issue of 150 and beyond, let me just indicate that some of the ideas we have circles around issues of subsidy, issues of protecting the industry against what we call unfair imported competition, either from the highly subsidized European products. We as a union...
You talk about the range of measures.
Yeah, a range of measures ultimately to ensure that, because it's not in our interest to destroy or kill agricultural sector in South Africa.
It strikes me here that what needs to happen is for you to come around the table and talk, because both players here seem to have very, very real concerns that around which you can find consensus. If that is the case, and I'm putting this question to both gentlemen, why did it have to go as far as it did? Why did people have to get hurt, in some cases killed, for the various players to sit around the table and to say the way we're doing things currently is unsustainable, both from the point of view of farm workers and farmers? Agri-SA.
I think there needs to be an inquiry into the real motives, real reasons behind it. I think the wage issue are just the ears of the hippopotamus. It is an issue for sure with great concern to many people, but I believe there are many other issues, many other socio-economic issues. Just to cite an example, if you work for 2 or 3 months a year, you can raise the wage much higher. But if you're unemployed for 8 months a year and you live in a squatter camp with bad services, I think you're exploitable for many reasons. South Africa needs an economy that grows, that can provide full-time quality jobs. And I believe some of the motives of these people, or the lack of understanding of what they're actually doing and what they've achieved now, is going to be more poverty, more structural adjustments away from job creation, much distrust amongst investors. And just to cite this example of getting asking for a relief through this mechanism, Section 50 of the Employment Conditions Act. You must open your books and everything, but
why is that not something that farmers are exercising?
Because they've tried it in the past and it were obviously just rejected. They distrust the process totally. Secondly, it's not a long-term relief. It lasts for 1 year, then you must do it again. And the minister herself said, it's supposed to be not the living wage, it is supposed to be the basic wage, the entry-level wage. So everyone should actually be able to afford it. And you cannot continuously apply to be exempted from it because you're small or medium-sized. And it's going, unfortunately, to ruin that section and the transformation policies of the sector because of what is happening. And I think it was a bad decision.
30 seconds, Mr. Masemola.
Well, we believe that poverty and other factors need to be addressed, like Agri-SA says, because you know, in informal settlement next to these farms, the squalor conditions are unacceptable. But when you go to the farms as well, for those workers who dwell on farms, the situation is not different. In fact, it may be worse. So in both on farms and off farms, social conditions ought to be addressed.